Decision making in C# is something you will do a lot. It determines the flow of the application you are making. You can make decisions in C# using user input, calculations, or data from data sources. Either way, you will need to know which decision making in C# you need to use. In this video, I want to show you 6 ways of decision making in C#, but it doesn't mean you can use them all. They all come with pros and cons. The first one I want to talk about is the traditional if statement. I call this one traditional because it's the most common decision making in C# and other languages, and it is pretty easy to use. In most languages, the syntax is the same. You have two values you want to check with an operator, and when the check is true, you do an action. So a very basic if statement looks like this. You have something you want to check. Let's say int a equals 1. If a equals 1, console.writeLine, a is 1. So you always start with an if, followed by a condition or conditional expression which will result in a true or false. When the condition is true, the code between the curly brackets is executed. When the condition is not true, so false, the application continues without executing the code between the curly brackets. This example is just checking one condition, a equals 1. But when you want to check more conditions that are related to or are important to the outcome, you need to add an else. Else means, as it's in the name, if the first condition is false, execute the next check. And it could look like this. This code shows that when a is not 1, the code inside the else will be executed. But what if you have more conditions, because the else doesn't have a condition? Something like a could also be 2, or do you want to make sure a is always higher than 0? Then you can add the else if. And else if is basically a combination of the first if and an else. It also needs a condition. The else if is located between the initial if and the else. It's not at the beginning or after the else. So let's add 2 else ifs, one to check if a equals 2 and to check if a is lower or equal to 0. So the first one is else if a equals 2 a is not 1 but 2. And the second else if a needs to be more than 0. Alright. It is also possible to combine two checks in the condition. For example, you want to make sure a is between 5 and 10. Let's add that one as well. The NN operator means and. So it needs to be between 5 and 10. If you would use the OR operator, it means that a is higher than 5 or lower than 5. The if statement is one of the most common decision making in C# and you will see it a lot. But as you may have noticed, the size of the complete if statement of the last example is rather big. Sure, you can remove the curly brackets, but developers prefer not to. And that's one of the biggest disadvantages of the if statement. If you are not careful, it becomes really big. Another well-known decision making in C# is the switch. The switch is the same as the if statement, but the switch works with cases. Each case represents a value of the condition you want to evaluate. The basic switch structure is the key switch, a condition, and the cases. And it looks like this. Let's remove everything except int a is 1. You start by the switch keyword. And then I want to check the a, so I want to switch between the values of a and start a curly bracket. Now I want to check if the a is 1, so case 1, This means that when A is 1, this piece of code will be executed. Case is 1. And you can see that this case 1 has the squiggly red line, and it means that it can now fall through to the next case label, which isn't possible because there aren't any other cases, but each case needs to be ended by a break. So, in short, I want to evaluate the value of A. The first case is value 1. As soon as A equals 1, the code of case 1 is executed. And then the break. In all the versions, if you remove the break, the application will fall through the case into the next one. So the following code would show both console write lines if I add case bigger than 0, A is larger than 0, 0, break. And then I remove this break. Older versions, this line of code would be executed, but also this one, and then it stops because of the break. If I add the break here, the switch ends after executing this line of code. But the newer versions, this isn't possible anymore. Case 1, as you can see, gives an error, and you need to add the break again. But both cases in this example don't make sense because they're both true. So which one is going to be executed? Well, it's the first one because code always works from top to bottom. But let's remove the case bigger than 0. If I want to rebuild the previous if statement to a switch, it would look a bit like this. I would add case 2. A is not 1, but 2. Break case smaller or equal to 0. A needs to be more than 0. Break case larger than 5 and smaller than 10. All right, break. And the last one is the default. I think most looks familiar, but do notice the case larger than 5 and smaller than 10. The AND, the word, is equivalent of the AND operator. The equivalent of the OR is the word OR. Another thing to mention is the last case, the default. This is the else equivalent in an if statement. So a switch statement is the second most used decision making in C#. It's a pretty simple syntax to check values and act on them. But like an if statement, switch statements are known to grow rapidly. They are also not easy to control if you want to check multiple value like the larger than 5 and smaller than 10. I would also not use a switch statement if there are a lot of cases. Keep a switch short and clean. Besides the switch statement, there's also the switch expression, which is another decision making in C#, and it looks a lot like the traditional switch, but with a big difference. The switch uses expressions rather than cases. So when I would create the switch expression, look closely and you will recognize the traditional switch. The big difference between a traditional switch and the switch expression is that it handles the results differently. A switch executes an action where the switch expression produces a value. So let me write the switch expression. Let's remove this one. String result is a switch, and this is the key, also the keyword. So 1, A is not 1, 2, A is not 1 but 2, and this is not correct. A is 1, smaller or equal to 0. A needs to be more than 0. Larger than 5 and again the word, not operator, and smaller than 10. A A is between 5 and 10. And an underscore, we'll be coming back to that later. Don't know how to handle this. Try again. I could copy paste this, but that's way too easy. And close it. And then console.write line result. Look closely at the code of the switch expression. Each case or pattern in this case is now an expression, and each expression has a left hand, the value of the variable a, and a right hand. The right hand is the value that is being returned. The syntax of the patterns remains the same as the cases, except for the default, which is now an underscore. And this is what we call a discard pattern, or simply a discard. It acts as a catch-all or default case when none of the other patterns match. Alright, next one is the ternary operator, and it's more of a shorthand for an if statement, and the basic syntax looks like, well, bit like condition, question mark, true result, and the else, the false result. If you worked in C# before, this might look a bit familiar, but we can also expand this to rewrite the initial if statement to the ternary operator. So let's stick with the int a equals 1, string result, because this also returns a value, is a equals 1. It is true, a is 1. It is true, then a is true, a is not 2. It is true, a more than 0. It is true, a needs to be more than 12. It is true, a larger than 5, and the number, a is more than 10. It is true, a is between, and a needs to be between 5 and 10. When this is not true, then don't know how to handle this. Try again. And then console.write line result. So I have to be honest, I don't like this one a lot. It's a lot of operators and it makes it less readable. Still, I do want you to know this one. So basically, each condition is tested, and when it's not true, it moves to the next condition. If none of the conditions are met, the last line is executed. And just like with the switch expression, the ternary operator returns a value when a condition is met. It does not execute a method. I wouldn't use this one, it's ugly, and when not careful, it's very hard to read. But that's just my opinion. Okay, did you know you can use dictionaries to make decisions? The dictionary holds the conditions and the outcome, and again, the way of this decision making in C# returns a value and does not execute code. So we'll put each scenario inside the dictionary together with the outcome. Then the code uses the first or default on the key, which is the condition. When the key or condition is met, the value is returned and printed. So let's rebuild this one. Okay, so let's create the dictionary first. The dictionary is a func int bool. This means that I am putting in an int and it returns true or false. And the integer is the value of a, and the boolean is whether it's 1 to smaller or equal to 0 or between 5 and 10. And when the function returns true, I want a string returned. And let's give it a name. Conditions. All right. First one, x represents the value of a. X equals 1, and when it's true, a is 1. Pretty simple, right? So let's copy paste this one. Next one equals 2. A is not 1, but it's 2. Small or equal to 0. A needs to be more than 0, not 9, 0. X larger than 5 and x smaller than 10. A is between 5 and 10. And that's it. And console.write line, conditions.first or default, x.key, A dot value. And if that returns null, don't know how to handle this, try again. All right, so I am calling the first or default on the dictionary conditions, and where I say that the key with the variable a is true, that is returned in the value, and if that's null because it's or default and the default value of a string is nil, if the outcome is nil, then it shows don't know how to handle this, try again. So when a is, for example, 6, it will be hitting on this condition or expression. And if a is minus 20, it will hit on this expression. And I will just repeat my previous opinion on the ternary operator here, because I think it's the same about the use of the dictionary. I wouldn't use this one. It's ugly, and when not careful, very hard to read, but again, that's just my opinion. Okay, and the last one I want to show you is the strategy pattern, which is based on an interface with different implementations. But I can't show you with the if statement I have created in the beginning of this video, because a strategy pattern is used for more complex decision making. So for example, I have here a console application, and it has an if else, and it has, well, actually 4 decisions to make. It checks if the input is Shrek, Inception, or the Matrix, and if none of those are true, then it says movie not found, crashing now, because the application will stop. So how can I make this better? Because it's a large if statement, and if more movies will be added, I have to create or expand this if statement. I want to show you how it works with strategy pattern. I'm not going into detail because that's a whole different story. But I have written an article about it, and I will place a link in the description of this video. So I want to change this code to this, which is really the same, but it's way shorter. So what I have done is I have created strategies, which is the strategy pattern. And each strategy is based on an interface. And an interface is like the blueprint of the class. And each class that implements this interface gets a title, a description, release date, and an age. It's all for demonstration purposes, so bear with me. Then I have created for each movie a class, and each class implements that interface. So each movie, Inception, Shrek, and The Matrix, will have a title, a description, a release date, and an age, period. So I have used one interface for 3 movies. Then back to the console application. With dependency injection, I register each class that implements the interface to the service provider. I also created a context, and the context is the class that will handle which decision to make. It gets a list of iMovie strategies, so the strategy interface injected, and I am saving this here in a private read-only. Then I can say, okay, context, show me the movie with a specific title. Then this method will search those movie strategies, which of those classes contain the same title as the title I am looking for. And if none of them is found, then I will throw an exception. Otherwise, I will write the title, description, release date, and the age. So when you look at this code, you have no idea which movie will be shown. The only one who knows that is the user that is, well, writing down the name of the movie he or she wants to see. It does look really complex, and, well, if you see it for the first time, it is, but it really helps you creating less code for a very complex if statement or decision making. Another big advantage of the strategy pattern is that as soon as I need to add a new movie, I can just copy paste this, rename the movie, like say the Muppets, and then grab one of the classes and then just say copy, paste, rename it, rename this one, and then just change it all here and it works. I don't have to change a lot more. No if else or an expression or a case to be added, just a new strategy. You can also write the code in a way that it will discover the classes that implement the iMovie strategy automatically. So I would not use this pattern for simple decisions like an if statement or a switch. The strategy pattern is more for really complex decisions. Keep that in mind, because otherwise you are building way too complex systems for something very simple. And like I said, I have written a dedicated article for this pattern and it is linked in the description of this video. And this is not really for beginners, and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, please read the article or skip it for now. Alright, so and here we have 6 ways of decision making in C#. The if statement and the switch are the most used and easiest to understand. Perfect if you want small checks to make, but be careful not to get them too large. The bigger they get, the harder they are to understand. While the ternary operator and dictionary could work, they are bulky and harder to read, and they could, just like an if statement and switch, grow too fast. I really use the ternary and the dictionary. The strategy pattern requires a bit more work to create, but if you have complex code inside an if statement or switch, you are better off with this pattern. Don't use it if you want just to check if a equals 1, for example. And in the end, it all depends on what your requirements are. But keep a cool head, don't overthink or overuse. And this is where the KISS comes in, which stands for keep it simple. I hope you liked this video. I know the subjects are a little bit short, but they are here to give you some idea of the decision making in C#. So don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more, and more is coming soon. Thank you for watching and I hope to see you next time.